Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to MTSU Student Perspectives on Textbook Costs, a presentation that is part of Open Education Week series, of the Open Education Week series coordinated by the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, or THEC. I'm Joshua Nave, Director of Academic Affairs at THEC, the state agency that supports and advances higher education. Part of my work focuses on initiatives that promote open and affordable course materials, including coordinating our textbook affordability task force and our OE Week activities. We will be recording today's session to share out after the presentation, so feel free to keep your cameras off if you do not want to appear in the recording. John Hagan and I will be monitoring the chat throughout today's presentation and collecting questions for our presenters to address at the end of the presentation. I'll also share three items in the chat: the schedule of this week's events, my email if you'd like more information or want to get involved, and a brief anonymous survey that gathers your feedback on this session along with your perspectives on statewide needs and barriers related to open and affordable course materials. Now, I'm happy to introduce today's presenters, beginning with Ginelle Baskin, Open Education Librarian at Middle Tennessee State University.
All right, thanks, Josh. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here today. My throat's a little scratchy, so I hope you can hear me. So I may have to sip on some water as we're going through, but thanks for being here. As Josh said, my name is Ginelle. I'm the Open Education Librarian here at Walker Library at MTSU. I think most of the people that are here today are probably from MTSU, but if not, if you're from around the state or elsewhere, we're glad you're here. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you would like, and tell us where you're joining from. I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves really quick before we start.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marianne Jones, and I am the chair of the Collection Development Management Department here at the Middle Tennessee State University Library. I've only been here for about a year and a half, and so I jumped right in with the OER, and I'm really excited about what we're doing here.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Mangrum. I'm the acquisitions librarian at MTSU. I have an interest in textbooks, and I'm really happy that Marianne is here because she did textbook support through acquisitions at her last institution. So we've been doing that for about 5 years and we're expanding it, but we all have a heart for OER and where it's at. So when Ginelle asked us if we want to do this survey with her, we were very excited to join.
Right. I also want to give a shout out to another person on our research team that could not be here today, and that is Dr. Karen Norse, who is our research and data librarian here at Walker Library that's been helping us with this project. She's a little bit busy off in France right now, but we wanted to make sure she got some credit for helping us with this project. So the title is Student Perspectives on Textbook Costs, and we're going to share the findings from a recent campus-wide survey that explores the impact of course material costs on our students. We're going to be highlighting some key data, student voices, and opportunities for faculty to make their courses more affordable, mostly through the use of open educational resources, also called OER, or other no-cost or low-cost materials. So let me go to the next slide. Okay, so I just wanted to share a little bit of background. So we are all academic librarians at MTSU, and textbook affordability has been a strategic priority within the library for several years. So as we mentioned, I lead the OER initiative for the library. Suzanne and Marianne work in our collection management department, and they oversee our library textbook program, which is a program where we put textbooks on reserve in the library, specifically for gen ed classes that have high enrollment of over 500 students. And recently also we've been looking at purchasing some ebooks for courses when we can find them, when they're available as unlimited. So that's kind of some of the ways that we've been already pursuing textbook affordability. And I just want to give a little bit of background of like how MTSU has been working on specifically OER. So this started here about 2019, and it was tied closely to a campus initiative around student success. And this started mostly out of the provost office, And then after we got a big grant through the state to do some OER projects. And then when those wrapped up, it was decided to have the OER initiative move to the library. And that led to my position being created. And I started in 2023. Oh, I noticed we got a couple people in the waiting room. I'm going to let in. Okay. Another couple things that are important to point out about OER. So we do mark courses at MTSU as zero textbook costs that use OER. We do that in our course registration system. It helps us to track how many courses are affordable for students and kind of the impact of that. So we mark courses that we use the label zero textbook cost or ZTC. So it could be it's using OER, it could be it's using a library ebook, or it just doesn't use any materials. If the cost for students for textbooks is zero, then we label it as ZTC. And so since we've been tracking that in the spring of 2022, those courses have saved our students approximately $3.6 million, which is amazing, and we're very proud of. We want to have that keep going up. Another thing that we're doing right now is the library is piloting some grants for OER. So we got some funding from our provost office. Starting last year, we did our first cycle, and we're calling it an affordable course materials grant for faculties to give them some incentive and some to pay them back for time involved in flipping a class to either OER or zero textbook costs course materials. And then we're doing our second cycle right now of 6 new projects that hopefully those will be starting to be used in classes in the fall. So this is kind of our first large-scale survey that we've done to examine student experiences specifically with textbook cost. A little bit about where this idea came from. I was attending a presentation through the Open Education Network, and there was someone there named Stephanie Buck who shared about they had run a survey at Oregon State and the benefits that they got from that. Because there's lots of other surveys that have been done. There's national surveys. There's several states that do surveys about textbook costs. And she was really vouching for the idea of it's helpful to have data specific to your population. So to see how your students are unique and different from others, and especially when you're going to stakeholders to talk about funding for an OER initiative or textbook affordability, it's helpful to have data specific to your campus and share with them things like that. So that's where I got the idea for that. And then I went and pitched this idea to Suzanne and Marianne because we'd already kind of teamed up about working on textbook affordability. And that's when we jumped in and decided to go for it. So let me share a little bit about the survey. Actually, before I do that, I wanted to give you guys some background of, we'd already started kind of collecting some student voice, some stories about textbook costs. We have been done some tabling events on campus about OER and other things. And I just wanted to share things we'd already collected and were hearing from students before we decided to do this survey. Because I think it's helpful to hear specific quotes from students. And so I'm actually going to read these, which won't take very long. So one said from a supply chain major that was a junior, "I wasn't financially prepared. I have to get 2 jobs just to pay for books." And then we had one from a biology student that said, "Sometimes I have to prioritize textbooks over groceries." And that one hits hard. They also said, "So they are so expensive, especially because I'm not working. So it's a lot of money I spent." And I thought that was an important point to talk about, is what is a lot of money. So we may think of from our perspective, spending $50 to $100 on a textbook doesn't seem like a whole lot. But if you're a student or you're a non-traditional student and you're working and you have a family, that can be a lot of money. And sometimes it can cause you to delay buying the textbook, to not buying it at all, or not have money that week, having to make decisions between, am I going to buy this textbook for this class, or am I going to have gas to put in the car to get to class? So they're having to make some tough choices. And then lastly, this one just sums it up really well. They just said, "Too much, it made me broke." So that's the things that we were kind of already hearing from our students. But we wanted to know more. We wanted to dig deeper. We had more questions. So that's why we decided to do the survey. So here are what our research questions were. And I'm just going to briefly read these. So our research question number one was, how much are our students spending on course materials compared to other states and the national average? Question two is, so how do the experiences of our first generation or Pell eligible students compare with those who are not first generation or Pell eligible? And then lastly, what amount do our students consider to be low cost when purchasing course materials? This last one comes from going back to the label that we give our courses that are zero textbook cost. That's the one label that we're using right now. There has been interest in creating a second label that's a low cost. And so we were considering of like, what do students even think is low cost? Do they think it's under 25? Do they think it's under 50? There again, that differs a lot between who you are and what your experiences are. So we wanted to hear straight from the students and have that affect future planning. Okay, so a little bit about the survey. So we adapted it from the survey that was run at Oregon State. They did theirs in 2022, and so we did add a couple questions in there that were customized to MTSU. We distributed it in September of 2025, and we sent it out as a campus-wide student email, or was what we call it here was a public service announcement. So they can get sent out to students via their email. After 2 weeks, we sent a reminder, and we did get several on that first. We got a lot, when we first sent it out. I think the timing was good. This was right after the classes had started. Some students were still purchasing their textbooks, and so it was fresh in their mind. And I think that worked to our benefit. We also promoted it we did several tabling events on campus. So we set up outside the library, in the student union. We went in Peck Hall and set up tables. Had some free donuts that they could come by and get a donut and take the survey. That was helpful. We also put it up on the library website, and we shared it out on social media. We did have an incentive, so they could, if they wanted to give us their email, they could enter a drawing to win a $25 Amazon gift card. And so we had pretty good participation, and I'm going to let Suzanne talk about the next part.
Yes, so just some of the numbers. So to start off, we had 1,028 total responses, and it was, I think, all the tabling mattered, pounding the pavement and pushing donuts. And I think we kept this going for 6 weeks, I believe. Is that right? So we might have pushed it off a week or two to try to give a little more chance to get some more results. So we had 1,028 total responses, and that's what you see here. It was a very good spread, a very good representation. Our graduate students are probably a little overrepresented in our population, but overall, everyone was there and showed up all years at MTSU. And we had, just for information, 957 usable responses for people who got through all the demographic information, which is what we're sharing now, and actually got to the questions. So we were really happy with that number. We were really proud that we got that many students to respond to the survey. Okay, next slide. And then a look at some of the other students and where they're coming from. 80%, 86% full-time, 13% part-time. That made me a little sad because I think we have more part-time students, but still. First generation, 38%. That's on par with what we have at MTSU, and received Pell Grant, 41%. That might be a little low from what I could tell for our overall MTSU picture, but pretty close, I think. And I couldn't find the most recent data for that. So, oh yeah, next slide, please. And then we asked, how much did you spend? And this is not as straightforward as you would think. So there's the textbook cost, which I think looks a little lower than what I would have expected. Course fees, much higher than I would have expected, because these are different from other fees they pay at the beginning with tuition, right? And then what they paid for access codes. Again, this one gave me some trouble, but sometimes that's included with the textbook, but sometimes it is not. Sometimes it's for access to a homework site, or they can buy them separately. and then also lab fees. And talking about this, you really can't not pay your course fees. If you don't pay them, you don't get in. But the other things are a choice. And as Ginelle was mentioning previously, from what we've heard for our students, they have to make a choice. And so one reason some of these numbers might look lower than course fees is because perhaps, it starts to drop off when they have to decide where they're going to spend their money. The next slide.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the strategies that students use to reduce their textbook costs. This question specifically asked what the strategies they were using for this semester to reduce textbook costs. So that semester was last fall. So that may have something to do with it being fall instead of spring, more classes, less classes. Anyways, I just wanted to qualify that for it was last semester. So we did find that most students said that they were purchasing their books from off-campus sellers. I would probably, hesitate to name those sellers, but probably Amazon and Chegg are right at the top of that list where students are getting their textbooks from instead of purchasing them from the bookstore here on campus. We also found it interesting that there were a lot of answers about textbook brokers. So there were some open-ended questions where we asked them to list some things, and the actual quote textbook brokers came up quite often. So we are assuming that they mean off-campus local bookstores, but we're not really 100% sure about that, and it's really hard to qualify. But a lot of those have gone out of business, and we actually no longer have a secondary textbook bookstore in Murfreesboro. Digital renting digital books was a close second. The problem with rentals is that students have to rent every semester, even for classes that they had that are consecutive, like semester classes, like calculus 1, 2, 3, biology 1, 2, 3. So they have to purchase that, they have to rent that digital book 3 times instead of just being able to buy it and use it for multiple semesters. So that can get really expensive, especially for some math majors that have to take those consecutive classes. I personally found it interesting that more students didn't share books with classmates. But in some discussions and conversations, it has been brought to my attention that a lot of textbooks are digital these days. So sharing is more difficult than it was when most of our books were print textbooks. The most significant response to us was that only 78 students responded that they know about the library's textbook program. So we're striving for more awareness of the print textbooks that we put on reserve, and we have started purchasing unlimited user ebooks when we can. And when we can't, we're still buying some ebooks with at least 3, and then we're buying 3 copies, and so we have at least 9 seats for some of our textbooks. But when we asked the SGA students why, they kind of said that we shouldn't really have used email, that students don't really check their email. So, and I know I hear that a lot. I find it hard to believe that you could be in college and not check your email, but apparently students don't check their email. And maybe that's just because they get barraged with email. But anyways, they did say that they thought having more signs around campus might help. I find that maybe hard to believe that flyers and signs would get people's attention, but that's what SGA students said. So, but now that we have some good information, we just need to act on it. Next slide. So also in addition to the previous slide, we did have students that said they found free versions. Now, exactly what they meant by free, is hard to decipher. But some, I think 11 students actually admitted to piracy by some form. Some of them actually said piracy. Some of them used funny quotes like this one up here that says, "There's a boat that sails the seven seas that offers reduced textbooks." And so we got a good laugh out of that one. Um, but we also have to remember that free to use is not always truly no cost. So the library is spending money on purchasing books. We have an OER librarian, and of course, there's salary and benefits that go along with that. And there's also supporting a platform for OER textbooks. Like here, we support Pressbooks, and the library pays for that. Um, a more abstract cost is authors' copyrights oftentimes are being violated. That's not really something that we can gather a lot of information on to know exactly what the cost would be. But as an author, losing your copyright or people stealing your work can be a little frustrating, and also authors lose money. Next slide. So this question, we actually asked them not just about the one semester, but about the actions that they currently take or have taken in the past as a result of textbook costs. So not purchasing the textbook was the answer most students gave for this strategy. So we do have a lot of students going to class without a textbook. The most surprising answer was that students were willing to earn a bad grade or fail a class. I found that unusual because I would have thought that most students, if they got to that point, would withdraw or drop. But apparently, some of them are willing to go past that withdrawal date and actually get a bad grade or fail. Um, some indicated that not registering for a specific course was one strategy that they were taking. But eventually, that strategy may prevent some students from choosing a major that may be heavily textbook reliant, or it may prevent them from choosing a major. And sometimes they might get into a major and then realize that it's too expensive and then change majors, which also makes it more expensive because then they have to kind of go backwards and take extra classes. So those were some of the strategies. Next slide. And here we are trying to qualify some of those. So 65% of the students, which is a pretty significant number, either sometimes or frequently do not purchase their books. So there are a lot of students out there who are finding other ways or just don't have the textbook. Um, a little less than half of students said that they share either sometimes or frequently. So there's that. But then there's the 26%, and I found this fascinating, that either sometimes or frequently said that they would earn a poor grade or fail. I just find that really hard to swallow as someone who is interested in student success. And then there were those that said 20% said they either frequently or sometimes did not register for a course. And, I guess if you don't register for courses and you figure out that you can't get a major unless you have that course, you either figure out a way to buy the textbook or you change. And so I think that's really sad for some students that can't afford to be in some programs. Next slide. And this is back to
Yeah.
Suzanne.
Yeah, I think this is me, but I'm dropping out, so I'm sorry if it freezes. Just jump in if I go still. But this is a pretty self-explanatory one, but if you could spend the money elsewhere, and it was overwhelmingly food, which
It does look like Suzanne's dropping in and
food
out.
prices
So
going up, that's everybody's story. But Janelle, I'm in the week. Oh, am I freezing?
Yes, but that's okay. Keep going.
Okay. And so, yeah, so I guess transportation or rent, I thought it was interesting. Our part-time students would, the second thing was pay outstanding bills, which makes sense because our part-time students are usually older and they have lots of other responsibilities oftentimes. Um, and I guess I just also want to point out communication because that one might seem a little weird, but that was like cell phones, other gadgets, they have to have. So, next slide, please. And asking the students, how financially prepared were you for textbook costs? And I guess we ended up, if you look at not very prepared or not at all prepared, that's about 40%, 41%, right? So I also think in the responses after you pay tuition, you kind of knew that books were coming, but it was more than you thought. Plus, lab fees are more than you thought, or course fees. It just feels like a whammy after the fact. So you kind of, it seems like everyone kind of has a vague idea this is going to happen, but the particulars, getting your financial aid in time is a very painful experience for many students. Next slide.
Okay, I'm going to talk about this one. So since I'm in charge of the zero textbook cost course marking, we wanted to ask students, did you even know this was available, that you could find courses this way? And they overwhelmingly said no, which is a little discouraging, but not too surprising. This is relatively new terminology that we're using on campus. We did briefly have a course marker that was just called OER. We decided to change it to zero textbook costs to be a little clearer to students so they would know what this means. So we're still trying to get the word out there about what this is. But it's hard to market. We're a large campus. There's a lot of students. What we had been doing is sending out emails every semester right before registration. We had put information in the registration guide, which who knows if they actually read that or not. And we had been sharing information with advisors. And that's kind of what we were relying on. And then as SGA told us of students take pride in the fact that they don't read their emails, even if their moms tell them to read their emails. So I think we're going to look into doing some signage as they suggested. And then they also talked about they're going to go talk to their advisors. They're going to be looking for information about registering and things from their advisors. So we need to have more coordination with advisors and make sure they have that information. And so we need to beef that up a little bit. I think we're back to Suzanne.
Okay. And this is a look at some of our qualitative data. Last question we asked is what other ideas do you have to share? So we're trying to kind of group these around certain access codes. I have one about access codes. I shouldn't have to have this just to do my homework. Don't list textbooks as mandatory if they're really just suggested. And I guess there was a lot of they want more competition. I put bring back textbook brokers, but there was a big wish that they could have some more opportunities. And then most people saying we already pay a lot for tuition; it should be free. It's a big complaint. Okay. So some of our key takeaways, textbook costs remain a significant barrier. I'm just starting to look at this, but I mean, we hit all the national numbers or higher for a lot of these things, choosing to sometimes or often skipping to buy a textbook. Students are very frustrated with the access codes and the homework platforms. And it has a real effect on academic behavior. They won't have the course materials on time, or they make decisions based on cost instead of using what they would like to do or what they think they're capable of or what kind of courses they would like to take, and they'll accept doing worse than they could because of textbook costs.
Okay, so we didn't want to leave y'all on a down note. We wanted to share some strategies for faculty of what can we do about it. Um, Obviously, this is a problem, but there are some things that we would recommend that you can do. So, number one, you can search for other alternatives, more affordable things. So, ideally, we'd like to start with OER. That's totally free, something that you could customize, see what's out there. I would say if you haven't looked in a while, if you looked a couple years ago and you didn't find something in your discipline, look again. There's constantly being new things published. There's some really great things out there. And if it's not the way you like it, you can go in and change it and adapt it, which is great. And then if you can't find OER or you don't have time to create your own, then we would suggest looking for library content. We can look to see if there's an ebook out there that would work or other low cost materials. And I wanted to just really briefly show you a new search tool that we have got for faculty on our textbook affordability page. It's called the Open and Affordable search tool. And so it helps you look for OER and ebooks all in one search box. So instead of having to go into Pressbooks and OER Commons and LibreText and look at each one of those, it takes a lot of time. You can go in here and it's pulling it for you all in one search. So I'm just going to do a quick example of I was helping an instructor a couple of weeks ago that teaches media writing here at MTSU. And I showed her this tool and what came up, and she found something for her class that she could use this semester. So you can go in here and look. Here's the OER guide to media writing. This one is from LibreText. You can scroll down and see Broccoli and Chocolate, a beginner's guide to journalism news writing. That one is from Pressbooks. And so it's really handy to find in one place where you can kind of search multiple repositories and search for it and see if there's something that can fit for your class. So that is something that I recommend that you can go. It's an easy, quick thing that you can do is to go search that. Let me go back to the slides and bring this back up. Another easy thing that you can do is if you have an extra copy of your textbook and you want to put it on reserve in the library, students will appreciate that. So we can have it where it's a 3-hour checkout. They can come into the library, read the chapter for the week, or make a copy of that chapter and not have to purchase the textbook if they don't have the money to do so. So that's a great way that you can help your students is by putting it on reserve. We do ask that if you can report your selections to the bookstore as early as you can. We would ideally like to have things that are marked as zero textbook cost also say at the bookstore, no course materials required, so students are not confused. So if we're consistent, that helps a lot. It also helps us, even if you're not using course materials, if you're using OER or you don't have a textbook, please still submit that to the bookstore. Go in there and mark no course materials required. That helps us double check. I can reach out to you and say, do you want us to mark your course as zero textbook cost? Another example is Suzanne uses that bookstore information to look up ebooks. So if you have a required textbook that then she can search and see if we can get it as an ebook, that's where we're getting that information from because that's the only list we have. So if you would submit that, that would help us out. That would help students out. And also double check that what you've submitted is reflected, is accurate because sometimes there's mistakes. And I wanted to also say, think really closely about, is your book required or is it recommended? If you're only going to have them read one chapter out of the book, maybe make it recommended instead of required. We had a lot of complaints in the comments from students of, they're making me buy this textbook and we only used it once or we never used it. It's listed at the bookstore, it's listed as required, and then I go to class and the instructor says, we're not going to use that. So please double check the information at the bookstore and save your students some frustration and also helps us with our programs in the library. And then last thing about the zero textbook cost, right now we're asking if you want that label on your class, if you have no cost for textbooks, we're asking you to submit that information to your department chair. I reach out to department chairs every semester and ask for this information. That's kind of the most feasible way we can collect that right now. So we're channeling it through the department chairs, and I send them a list every semester before registration starts and say, this is what's marked. If you have any additions or deletions, let me know, and ask them to reach out to their faculty. So if your chair is not asking you for this information, please send it to them or send it to me so that we can mark that for students, because ideally we want it to be correct when registration begins. So students can go in and have accurate information when they're choosing their classes. And then lastly, if you need help, feel free to reach out to us. You can set up a consultation with me. You can email all of us and let us know to help you search for things that are a better fit for your class. Okay, and then Marianne's going to talk about next steps.
So obviously, we are faculty members and we are doing this research not just for to get to know our students better and to know what they want, but our next step obviously is to write an article about this. Um, and then after that article, we want to do some comparisons to national surveys. We also are working on better strategies of faculty and library communication. So sometimes it gets really difficult, especially when, professors are inundated with student emails. And, if a librarian sends an email to a professor, sometimes it just kind of gets lost in the mix. So we are working on strategies to make that communication better. And then after all of that is said and done, we are going to take on another project where we analyze the qualitative data and hopefully do some presentations and publish an article about the qualitative data because we had a lot of students that took the time to actually write some of their ideas and some of their frustrations. And I think that if we can analyze that and get it out, it helps the students know that their voice is important. And I think oftentimes students think, you know, what do I matter? I'm just the student. I'm just the one paying the tuition. I really don't get to make any decisions. And so I think it would be good if we can get some of that kind of information out there. And I also wanted to say back on the other slide, the database that Ginelle showed you, we are also working in collection development management to get all of our unlimited user ebooks into that database. And so that's harder than it sounds, but we are working on that list. That way, anything that we've purchased that is unlimited users will also show up in through that database, so you don't have to search the library catalog. So, anyways, just wanted to throw that in there.
Okay, so that's it for us, what we've got to share with y'all. We'd love to hear if you have any questions or you have any comments. We'll open it up to everybody else. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see what y'all are saying in the chat if there's anything. Okay, I don't see any questions. I'm gonna give you guys just a minute. If you want to type anything in chat.
While you're thinking of questions, she's here. I want to say thank you to Denise Quintel, who created that search box for us and worked with one of our libraries vendors to do it. So thank you, Denise.
Yeah. All right, well, I do not see any questions or comments. Final call for, you can unmute if you want, share anything. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Josh really quick and let him wrap us up.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Ginelle, Marianne, and Suzanne. You've given us some great information to celebrate about how open education resources can be used as a tool for increasing access and success. And I think that MTSU is to be applauded for all of the efforts that you all are doing. Just a reminder, everyone, this recording and relevant materials will be available on the THEC website. The link to our website is in the chat, along with information about the other presentations this week, the presentation survey, and my contact information. Thank you all for joining us for this presentation. We hope to see you at our next session and last session tomorrow, and check that out on the website for that information.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.